Happy Friday, folks. Welcome to Talking March Madness. I am Miguel Mike Medina. This is my partner, Avery Jones. Boy, Avery, we saw, first of all, there was a lot of um, domination yesterday, but the one game that I am happy that it turned out to be a great game, but I am not too thrilled with the result, but I'm over it. And, but it was definitely heartbreaking. And that game that we're talking about, Arkansas versus Texas Tech. Arkansas, a team that has been through so much this season, growing pains. Coach Cal's first season was all about finding each other, growing. But the fact that in this first year they made it to Sweet 16 and should have been heading to the Elite Eight, it's an accomplishment. My thing is that now with the whole NIL transfer portal, we had to see who's gonna stay, who's gonna go. But if you're Arkansas, especially if you're an Arkansas fan, you woke up pretty miserable today. That was a very heartbreaking loss. For them to squander that big lead in the second half, but much credit to the Red Raiders for fighting back. But I knew, Avery, that once they took it overtime, momentum shifted. And that turned out to be the case. Texas Tech moves on to the Elite Eight, and Arkansas wait till next year. Let's see what happens next year. But very heartbreaking loss.
You're right. The Razorbacks had it in control. I believe they were up as much as 18 points, and they you said it, they literally squandered that lead. But I think Coach Calipari can now look at this team for the first year, see the accomplishments that they have achieved, and say to his players, if you want, I can still get you there. And I think, and we've talked about this, when you have coaches that can tap into their players and not just get them to stay, but also better themselves, not just on the court, but also in the classroom, then Coach Cal's got a great foundation for his time at Arkansas. And even though Razorback fans, I understand this is a heartbreaking loss, but you should be so proud of what this team has accomplished because we've said it before, when you have these football heavy programs and all of a sudden, once football season winds down and you have college basketball season come in, you can be so excited and you can get behind and you can rally your team, and look what has happened. Arkansas had a pretty decent football season. You uh, now turn the focus onto their basketball program, and you're there. You're there. You're there for them. You're traveling with them. You're seeing what they are capable of. And I I I remember watching this game and thinking, man, this is I'm like the Razorbacks have this game. I'm like the Razorbacks have this game. But you're correct. The moment it went into overtime, the Red Raiders had full control. But of like we said, that was going to be, I think, the dark horse game, and it ended up being, one of the most exciting games for Thursday night.
Darian Williams, someone that shot 8 for 26, but he made the big shots when it mattered the most. What a way to redeem himself. He hit a big 3-pointer that forced it to overtime. JT Toppin, who was the Big 12 Player of the Year, he added 20 points. 6 of them came in overtime. And Christian Anderson had a career high 22 points. As for Arkansas, what's crazy about this game is that Arkansas, we know they're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the nation. and they were shooting lights out, especially that first half. In total, they finished the game shooting 40% from the 3-point line. They made 10 of 25. That was a big upgrade. And the way they started the second half, it reminded me of the St. John's game where they start off with a lot of energy and putting on points, but rebounding killed them. Rebounding killed them in this game. But I gotta give to Arkansas. They had about 5 players in double figures. Billy Richmond contributed very nice off the bench. Um, Brazil
Janelle
made
Davis had
Brazil.
30 points.
Yep, he was the leading scorer for them. Brazil, he made some big shots as well, and I'm starting to become a fan of him just because of his hard work, his toughness, especially on defense. So his battle against Zuby made me respect him, and I said to myself, as someone I'm gonna keep an eye on. But if you're the Razorbacks players right now, I mean, if I were in that team today with Coach Cal and lose that game the way I did, my behind is not going anywhere. I want to
That,
run it back. I want to come
I
back.
agree.
I understand that, and I'm all for NIL. I'm all for players getting paid, but I am not for someone that doesn't have consistency. They want to jump from one place to another just to find, where they could get the most money. And shot selections worry them. I care more about winning more than anything. So if I'm a Razorback and I lose the game the way I did, knowing that we were so close of getting closer and closer, especially the kind of season that we had, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I actually had, it's funny we're talking about this. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine about NIL and transfer portal. And I completely agree with you. Sure, if you want NIL to whether to supplement a scholarship or to help you, achieve your collegiate dreams. And I think some people forget these are student athletes, students first. I went to college. I've college is a good experience, but also, and I know college now is sometimes being seen as something more debt heavy than getting the education to further yourself and have that experience. But these young men and women, you're going to school to play a sport you love, but you're also going to school to educate yourself. And I think that kind of gets pushed by the wayside. But I completely agree with you. If you are a Razorback player, knowing that your coach got you this far, that you helped get this team to the Sweet 16, to, bring some highlight to the Razorback basketball program, definitely you're like, you know what? I need to stay. I need to stay, especially if it's your second year there and you got this far. Sir, you have 2 more years to, achieve everything and not just on the basketball court, but also in the classroom. So, like I said, when you have a coach that can tap into your players, that can motivate your players in ways that they're not just successful, like I said, on the court, but also in the classroom, you're set. You're set. And not to segue, like as a Duke fan, that was Coach Krzyzewski's like bread and butter. He got his players to stay. He got his players to stay. Yeah, they won, but he also got them to stay for their education as well. And I think now you may see some more coaches tap into that. I mentioned it before, and it's kind of like, a broken record now. Coach Deion Sanders got his football players to a 3.0 GPA. I know they might seem like much, but trust me, for I like in school, a GPA was a minimum to play any sports, and to say how old I am, but that was a minimum to play sports. And yet you have this football team of 100 young men going to school. And like I said, he tapped into his players. Yes, I want you to succeed on the field, but I also want you to succeed in other areas, become leaders in other areas. And I think coaches now, especially those who aren't as confident with the transfer portal or not as positive about the transfer portal, they want their players to still succeed in ways where I don't need you to jump around for you to be successful. I can make you successful here, but I need you to give me some time.
Great point, Avery. Especially the point that you made with Dion and his players. I mean, hey, if you're gonna perform on the field, on the court, you got to perform outside of there as well. So I'm all for that. And now Texas Tech, they will play Florida, which that's next where we're gonna head into. Florida, once again, but they did it worse this time. That first half, Avery, I've never seen a game where I saw a turnover machine between two teams, especially the Gators. Both teams combined for 20 turnovers. In the first half, the Gators had 13. And once again, they were fortunate that they had the lead in halftime. And I'm missing something else here. Oh, yes, of course. The defensive rebounds killed Maryland, especially that first half. Alex Condom, he went down with a right ankle, but I knew he was going to come back because it didn't look like his injury was that severe to the point where he was going to be out. But Maryland, when Florida went 11-0 run at one point, then Maryland responded with a 7-0 run thanks to Jacoby Gillespie, who was making those raining threes. So he had 15 points by halftime. But Maryland, I'll be honest with you, that second half, they disappointed me. I don't know if they ran out of gas. I feel that what happened to Maryland in the second half somewhat happened similar to what BYU went through in the second half, that they just probably ran out of gas because both teams, they were there, they were in the first half, and even a small portion of the second half. But then at some point, they just couldn't keep up. So I didn't like. Oh, another thing is I didn't like the Terrapins' zone defense. I did not like it whatsoever. I felt that they gave away a little too much open threes to Florida. But hey, this is Florida we're talking about, and now they're moving on. So, but I felt that Maryland should have given a much better effort. But then again, we don't know what might happen, but it probably could be a reason that maybe they just ran out of gas.
Yeah, even Derek Queen, he had 27 points, the hero of the Colorado State game. But the Terrapins, like we said it was probably going to be turnovers that turned the tide of that game. Um, the Florida Gators are starting to look slippery, and they are just squeaking by some games that they could be losing. But like a colleague said of mine, a win is a win. That 16-point win, I don't think dictates how that if you were watching that game. The Gators need to look to their playbook and figure out how to play a consistent basketball game. Because if turnovers seem to be the key, you get that team that locks in and just keeps turning the ball over for you, then you're done. You have no way to come back. So Florida got by. I agree with you. I think the Terrapins just lost some gas at the second half. They I think in a way, I think the playing zone defense was probably trying to get the team some breath to try and hustle, but it just didn't work out. You're right. They looked like they had nothing left in the tank, and the Gators just took control of it, and they won. They won. I'm like I said, I'm surprised, but not surprised. But let's see how this continues into the Elite Eight because the Gators now have, I think, probably a very good test when they get to their next game and they need to figure out a way to play consistently.
And speaking of test, even though most of us, or I should say all of us, knew that Duke would win or they would be favorites to be Arizona. But if there is one team that I'm very proud of today from the games I saw yesterday, are the Arizona Wildcats. They made me so proud. The fact that they didn't go away, and that's something that even um, Duke's head coach John said it. He said they just couldn't go away. They didn't go away. Caleb Love, former Tar Heel, that man was a one-man wrecking crew for Arizona. And if this is the end for him, what a way to go out. 35 points to do everything they can to will his team to win. It was something magnificent to watch. But the Wildcats, they made me very happy. And they made me proud to the point where it felt like that's something that I wish I could say today about one of my favorite teams. I should say, even though they're eliminated, but I can accept the losses, but there are losses that I can accept because of the way you play. And the Wildcats, listen, if you're a Wildcats fan, you got to be super happy for the way they battle against a very tough, a very good Duke team. And the fact that you're telling me that one man was basically the main reason why they were hung in there, imagine that team had a loaded squad. So I give a lot of credit to Arizona. They made me happy as a college basketball fan. I love how they battled. Duke moves on, and it's not going to get easier because they will face Alabama. Alabama beat BYU.
Yeah.
Alabama was just it was just
Alabama,
they dominate. BYU disappointed me, but Alabama
Alabama
did their
was
thing.
locking in like their football brethren because when they started shooting threes, it was like, you know what? Let's score points like our football brothers do. Score 25.
Yep.
They hit 25 3-pointers, and I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are acting like a basketball team. If I can segue back, I completely agree with you. If you're an Arizona Wildcat fan, you need to be proud of the squad. Like I said, they just wouldn't go away. In Florida, when mosquitoes hang around, you think they go away. You think you got one, and then there's another one. And I completely agree with you. Arizona just would not go away, but yet they hung in there. They wanted to be taken seriously by this really good Duke team. And I think Duke took them seriously to the point where they could not give them any leeway whatsoever. And like that score, it just shows how both teams were just in it to win it. Like they wanted it so bad. Both teams wanted it so bad. I agree with you. Caleb Love, 35 points. I mean, you look at that squad, you're like, hey, if this is what we got, same thing. This is what you got first year. Hey, let's take a look at what we have. How can we mold what we have in order to make this team a little bit better? Let's don't get me wrong. The Arizona Wildcats were a very good team, a very good team this year. And knowing how that game turned out, their future again is still looking very, very bright. Duke winning. Now they're going to play Alabama, which has me conflicted because I'm an Alabama fan for football, but I love my Duke Blue Devils. But Alabama just decimated BYU. They just decimated BYU. Once they got control behind the arc, that was it. That was it. And it was almost like you were watching something amazing from, maybe one player, but all of a sudden it was an entire team that decided, hey, let's just shoot the ball and see what happens. And everybody was locked in. Everybody was locked in. Mark Sears had 34 points, and I think if he just kept going, he could have scored maybe about 40, 45. But that team could be a menace. The Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team could be a menace. And I mean, that's a Saturday night game that I am definitely intrigued to see. Definitely intrigued to see. Alabama #2 versus Duke #1. That could be a high scoring affair.
Strongly
In
agree.
fact, I see that team. I see that game probably eclipsing maybe about 180 points total. Total.
If we get this Alabama, we play against BYU. Yeah, I can see that happening. So Avery, today's game we have Michigan State versus Ole Miss at 7, Tennessee versus Kentucky at 7:39, Auburn versus Michigan at 9:39, and Houston Purdue at 10:09. What's funny about Houston versus Purdue is that Houston is #1, but they're gonna be playing in an atmosphere where is at Indiana, so a lot of Purdue fans. That makes me laugh, but yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But Ole Miss, I will say this, Chris Beard, what he's done with this program has been sensational. What he's gone through the last 3 years was unbelievable. But he's using sports TV analysts like Tim Doyle as motivation because Tim Doyle, when it came to the whole Selection Sunday situation, he called Ole Miss basically frauds. So, and Coach Beard, he let him know that he's hearing it, but he's like, hey, all publicity, good publicity. So he's using whatever he can to fuel his team. And but yeah, I thought that was funny. But yeah, Michigan State versus Ole Miss should be fun. Like I told you, I want Michigan State versus Michigan in the Elite Eight. But man, if there's a game that I'm looking forward to tonight, Tennessee versus Kentucky. That's the one I want. And I'm glad that it's not a late game. So
yeah. You can easily catch, and I agree with you. You can easily catch this game in a setting where, as long as it's exciting, like we've got the exciting games Thursday,
I
you
got my
could get
notebook, my March Madness
yeah,
notebook, so I'm
that's
ready.
it. There you go. There you go.
All my notes like a true
It's
journalist.
yeah, it's I'm very, it throws me a bit when, people want to use hate to kind of solidify a point, especially in sports. So it kind of throws me when you have a professional, calling a basketball team that have worked hard, frauds. Like I said, there are some I can always be surprised by a team, but here's the thing. They're playing the game. I'm just ordinary, you know, sports fan sitting at home watching them, and I can understand the hard work. I played a year of sports in high school, So, in middle school. So I understand where the hard work comes from. But to kind of say that in a professional setting kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth. But what can work for a head coach, what can work for a team, what can fuel a team, I'm absolutely for, because if you have individuals that don't take you seriously, that don't think you can get the job done, don't think you can win the big game, by all means, use that as motivation. By all means, use that motivation. Um, the Ole Miss Rebels, they're the highest seed playing tonight at number 6. But I agree with you. I think if they could use that fuel, but eventually it could burn out. Michigan State's only favored by 3, so uh, that could be a very good early primetime game. But 30 minutes later, you got the Wildcats and the Volunteers, and like I said, that could be old school college basketball SEC rivalry. That's like, hey, didn't we play you and beat you this season by whatever, And I look to that game to be physical, some trash talking here or there, but sometimes you just gotta let the players play. Let them play the game. If it's just talk, let them talk. So let them score, let them shoot, let them do whatever they need to do. As long as it doesn't get out of control, I see that game at 7:30 to be very, very exciting. Very, very exciting. You know, but then, you're looking at Michigan Auburn, and I agree with you. Michigan State, I'm kind of for that matchup too. But Michigan has got to come with a really good game plan. They can't come, pardon my French, they can't come half-ass
Mm-hmm.
to play Auburn. They can't. So they need to come physical. They need to start off strong. They need to definitely stay control of the boards, watch the turnovers, and the Michigan Wolverines will have that game in the bag. And then I I'm kind of chuckling too. Purdue is the visitor playing Houston in Indianapolis. And for those who may not know, Purdue is Indiana school. And if you're a Boilermakers fan, even though you're happy to where your team got, if you could carpool it, pool your money, you know, maybe push a little bit for the credit card to get a ticket to that game. I see Lucas Oil Stadium to be more Purdue Boilermaker fans to fuel that team than the traveling Houston Cougar fans, because that could be the catalyst that could fuel Purdue. Purdue has been like a tale of two teams this season. Like they were on a roll and then they're on a losing streak. They're on a roll and they're on a losing streak. And they have to come with a really good, steady, consistent way to tap in to get the Cougars riled up. And if them playing kind of a home game works, I see them to use that in their favor. But the games tonight, Friday night, you have very interesting stories here. But Friday night games, the number one game must see is definitely that Kentucky Tennessee game. Definitely.
Last but not least, Avery. Just to quickly talk about it. So Tom Izzo, he made some fiery comments about the transfer portal. The transfer portal opened up on Monday. I don't agree about them doing that during the middle of the tournament, but that's the situation. So when The media asked him about the transfer portal. This is what he had to say, and I quote, I'm not dealing with it all. I'm not dealing with it at all. The only thing that I would deal with is I don't run players off. So you gotta have spots to pick up transfers. And maybe we'd have one spot if everybody came back. Maybe we wouldn't. If you don't have spots, why are you doing that? So that I can get somebody better. I can get a better girlfriend because one I got isn't good enough. I don't know. Get a better wife because the one I got isn't good enough. It's a loaded question. It's one I really have zero interest in answering because I think it's ridiculous that the NCAA or any other entity put these two things together that people like you have to ask these questions. And I value that you have to ask them. And I do get upset when people are talking to our kids about them. Now, some people they didn't like. I mean, it's 2025, so of course people are sensitive when it comes to the truth. Some people didn't like it. Me personally, I'm on Tom Izzo's side on this one. Especially the fact that we have this talk during the middle of the tournament can cause a huge distraction. So I don't blame him. In terms of the whole NIL thing, I do feel that the coaches, the adults, they could have done something a while back so that we could avoid this kind of issue. But this kind of issue is far from over because this is something that's gonna continue to be mentioned. So at some point, there's gonna have to be some guidelines in both college football and in basketball.
I agree with you. Coach Izzo's comments may be very straightforward and blunt that some people may not like, but I'm part of that generation that sometimes you have to say the truth and you have to say it in a way that people understand your side of the conversation.
Yes,
So
yes,
I completely agree with Coach Enzo because I'm kind of fed up with the transfer portal too. How are you gonna open up a transfer portal in the middle of NCAA tournament? Like, why? And just like we mentioned college football, they open up the transfer portal around bowl season, like I think like right before bowl season or after some of the first bowl games. And now that we have an expanded playoff, it can be detrimental to a team. But focusing on college basketball, I mean, they're not happy with his comments, but he's not wrong. I'm like, the NCAA has got to figure out a way. If you want to have a transfer portal, if you want student athletes to try to take control of their professional uh, sport aspects, okay. But like I said before, you are a student first, then an athlete. Your first job is to get an education. Because trust me, there are many, many, many individuals that would love to be in your position. Because not only can I go to and let's just look at all the schools that made it to the tournament, even the ones that played in the first four. These are great institutions. That's how you become an institution. Now, granted, everything is not perfect. Everything is not, you know, glitter and rainbows and sparkly, but to go to a Duke, to go to a Tennessee, to go to a Purdue, to go to a UCLA, to go to a South Carolina, to go to a North Carolina, to go anywhere and have that opportunity to not just get a great education, but also play for a great institution, and then say later, oh, I have this piece of paper with my name on it from Michigan State. But yes, I also played college basketball. Yes, we did go to the NCAA tournament the 4 years I went there. It's again, I think this is where the coaches need to kind of sit their players down and say, hey, I know you want to be here to play, to possibly take it to the next step, but at the same time, I know some of you are here to not only make your family proud, to see you play, but also, you know, that piece of paper. Because side note, I have 2 bachelor's degrees. My first bachelor degree, my mom, when I tell you my mother was absolutely excited, freaked out. She couldn't be more proud. She couldn't be more proud. And I think parents still want that for their kids, because like a lot of parents, they want their kids to be a little bit better than themselves. So if you have parents that worked hard to get you that pair of shoes so that you could play, to make sure they, you know, put a little extra away so you could go on that school trip or that, tournament so you could play. And they see you now playing at the college level, that may have been or could have been, financially taxing, and they love seeing you play. They love seeing you wearing that uniform of Ole Miss, Michigan, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, any school. Parents love to see it because parents are always going to be proud of their kids. My second bachelor's degree, my mother was not on this plane of existence to see. But when I walked across that stage in Nebraska for the institution that I got it from, she had the best seat in the house. So for student athletes, I think they need to sit down and realize, like, what is really their main goal. No matter how old we get, we have goals. No matter what we do, we have goals. Even now, you have goals and I have goals. And as we talk about sports or other things, sometimes our goals are aligning, sometimes they could just be in cohesive to an overall aspect of what we want to do. So Coach Tom Enzo saying those comments, he's probably one of the coaches that other coaches heard and are like, yep, he's right. But how do I tailor it to a recruiting class? How do I tailor it to, you do have some players that do want to make money, that possibly want to help their family, but you may have those families that, let's say, hey, my son wants to play for you. You're a really great player. You have really great tenacity. You have produced very good leaders. And I think that's something even today, whether it be in sports, whether it be in business, whether it be just anywhere, I think parents and people, they want their children or they want their colleagues or their friends to be good leaders. I'm not talking about like you have to be like tip top, and it doesn't even have to be like a government thing. You can be a leader just in your group of friends. You can be a leader, as far as who you're working with. Leader doesn't necessarily mean boss. Again, I'm kind of using the Deion Sanders terminology, but he's figured out a way to tap into these young men and make them leaders. He knows some of them are not going to make it to the NFL, but he's going to prepare them for life. And you're going to have a lot of head coaches, football, basketball, soccer, hockey, this new generation of athlete, they're tapping into them to get them ready for life, because life is already hard as it is. So why do you need to be harder with NIL, transfer portal? Hey, you're here to play a sport, but you're also here to get an education. I'll help you in any way I can. You know, do you need to show up early for a team meeting? Do you need a tutor? Do you need, someone to talk to because you have this class that is wearing you down? Do you need to, leave a little bit early in order to get to a study session or a study group? The more coaches know that other things can help their players for what they need on the field, on the ice, on the court, that can also help them win at life, they're going to tap into it. And right now, Coach Enzo is, I think, could be, I don't want to say like, get the mob started, but he's saying things that a lot of coaches have probably said in a different way. But I think more needs to be said, because if it's not regulated, if it's not, fine-tuned, if more guidelines aren't put in place so it can be not just better for the schools, but better for the student athletes, chaos can ensue. Now, I like a little bit of chaos, but in this case, this type of chaos can be detrimental for these institutions.